When it comes to political drama, the office of the Massachusetts State Auditor tends to be something of an afterthought, but my next guest is changing that in a hurry. Earlier this month, new State Auditor Diana DiZoglio announced that she was launching an expansive review of the Massachusetts Legislature, a notoriously opaque body where she formerly served as an aide, a state rep, and a state senator. DiZoglio has also launched audits of the depressingly dysfunctional MBTA system and of the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority, which stands accused of discriminating against black employees and vendors. It is a fast start that points up DiZoglio's expansive vision of her office's authority, a vision not everyone agrees with. Diana DiZoglio joins me now. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So with your audit of the legislature, what are you hoping to learn about that body that we do not already know?
Yeah, so just a little bit of history here for folks. The state legislature actually has been audited before, but it hasn't been audited since 1922. Financially speaking, at least according to the records that we've been able to find, we're still looking through some of the other records that exist in places like the State House Library and other places.
And that was when the auditor was sort of a bookkeeper for the state, right? They documented incoming money in the legislature, outgoing spending, and that was about it.
Yeah, they audited the legislature. I think that's the important point here, right? So it is under the authority of the state auditor's office to audit the legislature, as the state auditor does for every other entity and department in the state of Massachusetts. So this hasn't been done since 1922. It's been 100 years or so, and we are actually mandated to audit every state entity and department every 3 years. So as you can tell, it's been quite a long time. They're up for a review.
But if you have the authority to audit the legislature, why hasn't anyone done it? You say 100 years. I mean, the audit that you're seeking to undertake, if I'm correct, is way more expansive than what was done back then. You've asked for budgeting, hiring, spending, and procurement information regarding active and pending legislation, the process for appointing committees, the adoption and suspension of House and Senate rules, and the policies and procedures of the House and Senate. To a layperson's ear, that's a whole lot of stuff. Why hasn't anyone tried to do what you're doing in the last 100 years if you can do it?
Yeah, the legislature just sort of magically fell off the list at some point and stopped being audited. But what I can say is I can't speak for other people that came before me. That's up to them to speak for their rationale. What I can say is that we are asking nothing more than to conduct the same types of audits that we do for every other state agency. We do what is known as performance audits in the Office of the State Auditor, where we look at processes, we look at procedures regarding ways to help to shine a light on potentially problematic areas in state government so as to help those agencies to be able to perform better on behalf of the taxpayers they serve. This is an opportunity for the state legislature to work together with our office on increasing transparency and accountability and hopefully equity as well, by helping to shine a light on some of the dark areas that might need to have a light shined on them.
I still want to get a better sense of what you might learn as you move forward with this. Let's take one line of the things that you've requested. Information regarding active and pending legislation. What might that include?
So I'm not at liberty right now because of government auditing standards to get into details about any specific audits until the audit report is done. That's a federal organization that actually guides our office on the way to conduct audits. But what I can say is regarding looking at things like active and pending legislation, that's something that I think folks can, or folks know, has been a concern through the years. When do members of the general public get access to what's happening with particular bills? Is it before and not after those bills have already come up for a vote? Do lawmakers and the general public have access to being able to read bills before they are actually voted into law? What's going on with those sets of circumstances? So, left it sort of broad and open so that our audit team has the ability to work with the Government Accountability Office on developing a strategy for how to best audit this agency since it hasn't been done in over 100 years. We want to make sure that we're doing things by the book, the right way, according to the standards that our office is governed by, and that work is currently in process. That plan is being developed as we speak.
Could that also include something like communications with leadership in one or both chambers with rank and file members about how they're expected to vote on a particular piece of legislation, or whether they would, whether it's requested or advised that they vote a certain way?
Certainly conversations could be part of an audit. Conversations with staff, conversations with legislators could be part. Again, those processes are being developed as we speak. alongside of the Government Accountability Office, who is working in coordination with our office to make sure that these steps are taken appropriately.
And this is the federal GAO that you're talking about?
Yes.
Working with, okay. The next step, if I understand correctly, you've told the legislative leaders that you're going to do an audit. Have you requested information from them yet?
So we have sent an engagement letter.
Right.
We requested a response to that engagement letter and still have not received a response, unfortunately.
Either from the House or Senate?
Correct. We did hear some comments from the Senate President recently, indicating that it was their opinion that they already had an audit by a private entity that they contracted out with.
And that she doesn't think that you have the authority to do this, that it's unconstitutional from her vantage point.
Well, the argument from the Senate President is that there's a separation of powers, but that argument doesn't hold water because the reality is that our office audits the courts and the judicial system. So, we are not limited in that way. And we're not seeking to tell anybody, we know that we can't make any agency do anything that they don't want to do. It's simply our job, Adam, to shine a light on what's happening, present that information to the general public so that the public is informed about what's happening up on Beacon Hill. And then the legislature does have the right to make their own decisions about any actions that they would take or not take after that audit. So they do have power to govern themselves. We're not asking for power to govern them. We're asking just to see the books.
Just to be clear, you're saying you don't have the authority to tell them how to respond to the findings of an audit, but you do believe you have the authority to compel them to provide the materials.
Correct.
That you're asking for.
Yeah, we're governed by Chapter 11, Section 12 of the Massachusetts General Laws. If anybody wants to go and look at it,
it's a good read.
It lays out very clearly that we are required to do these audits of all these state entities, and the legislature is not exempt on that list. What is exempt on that list is things like personal tax returns, right? So we're not able to go in, nor would we seek to do this, and do any sorts of personal investigations. Any personally identifiable information is generally redacted when we conduct our audits. We are not the AG's office. We're not the Inspector General's office when we go into these agencies. Our job is to audit, to examine, again, the processes and the procedures so as to help agencies identify gaps that need to be filled so residents can be better served.
A couple more questions about the legislative piece, and then I got to hustle to a little more of what you're doing. So in your engagement letter, you said when we tell you we want whatever information we ask for from you and the legislature, you've got 72 hours to provide it to us. If they don't provide the information that you ask for, when you ask for it, within 72 hours, what do you do next?
We're going to be sending a follow-up letter we're planning on sending a follow-up to the Speaker and the Senate President and others who were copied in on that communication and hope for a response. But we are going forward with trying to schedule meetings with them and hope that they will be responsive. Again, this is something that we view as an opportunity to work together to help to increase accountability, and I hope that everybody in the legislature would welcome that opportunity,
so
especially during Sunshine Week.
If I'm understanding you correctly, you're not looking to fast forward to a court challenge if the legislature doesn't provide the materials that you ask for when you ask for them. You want to try to use suasion rather than the courts, or am I getting that wrong? I don't want to put words in your mouth here.
I hope that the courts do not have to be involved in this conversation. They shouldn't have to be involved in this conversation. That is a path that I said I would take if necessary. But again, I am hoping that legislative leadership will come around, will decide that it's in the best interest of taxpayers to work together, again, to conduct an audit that every other state agency receives. The legislature should not be above the law, especially when it comes to things like transparency, accountability, and equity in this regard.
So you're also going to be auditing the MBTA, the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority, and I learned shortly before we started this conversation, you're going to be launching an audit of the use of non-disclosure agreements in state government, right? Are you launching that officially next week? Is that when communications will go out?
Which one is this?
Non-disclosure agreements.
Non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah.
So we are currently, again, in the process of working. I'm a new auditor, so we are calling the Government Accountability Office quite often these days to make sure that we're doing everything by the book in accordance with their standards. And they are guiding us in the process right now of how to best conduct our audit of non-disclosure agreements being used across state government. We have a great example in the state of Montana of an audit that was conducted successfully and actually ended up leading the conversation in the state of Montana on how to better provide for transparency and accountability surrounding the use of taxpayer dollars that fund non-disclosure agreements.
We should mention, many of our viewers will know, some of them will not, that this is a topic of personal interest to you. When you were a legislative aide, you said that you were subjected to sexual harassment. As you left that position, you were forced to sign an NDA. What are the consequences for government institutions, public institutions, when the use of NDAs is widespread, do you think?
So right now there seems to be little to no accountability regarding the use of your taxpayer dollars and the taxpayer dollars of all those watching at home to fund the silencing of public employees who may have been harassed, discriminated against, or abused. Right now, it appears as though folks in various state agencies are able to simply decide to use non-disclosure agreements with their own process or lack thereof in the institution that they are in charge of, which obviously can lead to opportunities for abuse of taxpayer dollars to fund non-disclosure agreements that maybe should not have been given. Certainly we want to make sure that our tax dollars aren't being spent to silence victims of things like sexual harassment or racial discrimination or other issues, allowing for perpetrators to abuse our tax dollars to cover up for bad behavior by silencing victims who otherwise may want to speak out about those things so as to fix some of the challenges and identify that there are challenges in an organization.
I was going to say, it seems like it perpetuates or could perpetuate toxic cultures, right? If
Exactly.
the use of NDAs is widespread, not only is it a financial drain, but it keeps these cultures.
And that was my argument in the House of Representatives and in the state Senate, where I saw it for years to reform how non-disclosure agreements are used in state government, highlighting that they're able to be abused across state government if there's no accountability. And right now, what I can say is when I went to visit the comptroller's office years ago, not with the current comptroller, but I went to go visit the comptroller's office, and I did ask for a breakdown of how many of the state settlement agreements had non-disclosure agreement attached to those settlements, just so we could gauge how often they were being used, Adam. And there is no record that's kept in the state of Massachusetts. So you can imagine if there's not even a record of how many exist and how much money was spent on silencing employees about potential abuse, you can imagine that there, may be some room for improvement in the process regarding how they're being used as well. So we're going to take a deep dive into that.
Two more quick questions for you before I let you go. What do your colleagues who you served with in the legislature say to you in private conversations about the audit that you're undertaking? I know that Senate President Karen Spilka has said you can't do this. You obviously disagree. Your predecessor, Suzanne Bump, the auditor, has claimed that you can't do this. But what do the people you served with think?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of legislators who actually welcome the opportunity for an audit, but understand that they may be retaliated against if they support such an effort. That is, something that, I got to see firsthand during my time in the state House of Representatives and in the state Senate, the opportunity for retaliation if you don't vote a certain way or if you challenge the leadership team on certain issues where you may disagree. That fear of retaliation, I think, is a concern for a lot of legislators. Now, some have come out anyways and said that they fully support the opportunity for an audit, that they think it will help the institution to be able to be more transparent and accessible to the people they serve. And then others, a lot of folks have expressed to me that, they might be supportive, but fear that if they do express that publicly, that their district will be punished, their community will be punished.
Do you think it's a majority in both chambers that would actually support this publicly?
I haven't spoken to that many people to be able to say it's a majority or not a majority. I can say that I've spoken with several of my colleagues.
Final question for you, I promise. Anything else coming up next week that we should be looking out for? Big announcements?
This Sunday I'm going to be at the St. Patty's Day breakfast.
Right.
That will be
But you're not going to be auditing the St. Patrick's Day breakfast.
Planning to sing a little song, so we're going to have a little fun this weekend. But,
should we look to that as for clues to what you might be doing next?
I don't know that there'll be clues.
Okay.
I will say that you shouldn't really need clues, though, because I actually have a list that I'm happy to share with anybody of the audits that we are currently conducting. So anybody can ask for information into that.
Right.
If you have any questions, we're conducting over 70 audits right now
That's
of
a lot.
state agencies.
I will have to get, because I wanted to ask you about that number and whether you got the resources necessary to do that. I'll have to get you back if you're willing.
Sounds good. I'm happy to
Diana
come back
DiZoglio,
on.
thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, and happy Sunshine Week.
Thank you. You too.